Hey Joe,
So
what's happening, man? How you doing?
nothing much, actually, a little bit, sort of, kind of not so much. I have a giant spotlight going on down into the lawn right now, and even a kid's baby camera set up so I can see a certain area where some beehives are. Um, because I got an alert there's a bear in the neighborhood, and I've never shot one of those, and I'm allowed to since I own beehives or something like that, and I want to make bear jerky. So I've got one eye on the interview and one eye on the nanny camera that's outside in the bee lab, bee yard right now.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you're gonna go chasing after that bear, you better bring this camera with you so we can catch it on film.
I'll try. I'll try my Um, if it's the buck, though, I don't really hunt at night, but I will go outside and pretend to just to see if I can scare it. There's an
Nice.
elusive buck too. It's like an 8 pointer that has a beautiful rack, and all it does is come out at night, and I just want to scream at it because it's never around during the daytime during hunting season.
I'll tell you what, it would look pretty good in that room behind you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the hard part is this has cantilevered walls. So
Yeah.
like if you can imagine a deer right there, just be like, like right at you,
Oh,
angry.
well, yeah, well, maybe that's not such a good idea after all. Well, I would like to kick this off and formally introduce you to my audience. So, everybody, Joe Flowers. Joe, thank you very much. I appreciate you being here today and checking out the Outer Limitless YouTube channel. So, thank you for being aboard.
No problem. No problem. It's my pleasure. I mean, it's a few nights before Christmas. What else would we be doing? Hang with family? No way.
We'll have plenty of that. Well, Joe, if I could maybe introduce you just a little bit. You are definitely into wilderness survival, bushcraft, primitive living. You're an outdoor adventurer, and I would say primarily focused on the jungle rainforest environment.
Hmm.
You are the owner of Bushcraft Global. You're a knife designer for Condor Tool and Knife, Tops Knives, and as well as some others. And you're a husband and a father. So, I think there's some things mixed in there that we definitely have in common.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, we all started this getting into gear, and that's one thing I know I have in common with most of my, friends that out here that want to interview and do stuff too. So.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I want people to be able to find you, and I'm hoping after today's conversation they've liked, what they've seen and heard, and they want to find more. So first off, is you do have a website. It is bushcraftglobal.com. You run your social media on Instagram, also at Bushcraft Global, and Facebook at
Yep.
Bushcraft Global. Am I missing anything there that people need to know?
Nope, that's primarily it. Hopefully, by the time you have this edited, the new website for Bushcraft Global will come up. Man, that stuff costs a lot of money and time. Yeah, putting some time into that since I'm not having trips right now. In the middle of December, so that's what we're looking there. So if you really want to find a lot of information or like follow me around, you can see me on Bushcraft Global on Instagram, and of course on YouTube with other interviews and just all around. If you're into bushcraft, you'll find me somewhere, sadly.
Oh, I think everybody's going to enjoy this. So we've already talked a little bit in the past. We came up with some topics for today. The main things we're going to cover. I mean, obviously, we have to get into Bushcraft Global. People need to obviously understand what that is. That's a huge part of you and a huge driving force for you. So we have to get into that. We also have to talk a little bit about your knife designs because there are probably a lot of people that are familiar with you and they're going to want to hear a little bit about your background and some of your philosophy. But the
Sure.
next thing I think is going to be a little departure from what most people would, typically come to Joe Flowers for. We have decided that we're going to talk a little bit about gear today. If there's one thing that we absolutely need when we get into these adventures, it's gear. And maybe we have some useful tips and tricks. I mean, you're a guy that's been out there, you've experienced an awful lot, and I think you probably come with some useful tips and tricks that everybody could benefit from. And beyond that, there's maybe some cool gear stories that come out of that. Maybe
Yeah.
there's the successes, but there's also the failures. So I think we're going to have a pretty interesting conversation tonight. I hope everybody's going to enjoy that. And with that, Joe Flowers, if you're ready, let's kick it off.
Sure, man. Go ahead and start with any of the first questions if you got there, Eric.
Excellent. All right. Well, so Bushcraft Global. In order for people to understand this, now this is really, if I could summarize it, adventure expeditions to the
Mm-hmm.
jungle where participants focus on wilderness living, primitive living, and jungle survival. And it's pretty interesting when you look at some of the details that you have on your website and all the different aspects that you cover. But the first thing that really came to my mind is, when did you start Bushcraft Global? Like, when was it founded? What made you start it in the first place? And sort of how were you influenced, and what was your upbringing that took you to this point and to where you're now leading these expeditions in the jungle?
Well, you know, I really, really loved the jungle as a kid. I was always in the swamps, and I just wanted something a little bit more extreme than the bugs and items that you find in North American swamps. So I went in 2009 to Peru with Jeff Randall of Essie Knives, who was a good friend at the time because I just started doing design work and just knew him, all around. And he gave me an invite, and when I got to the jungle, I was completely hooked. And so, any other chance I got to go down south to anywhere in South or Central America, I would. And I ended up going down on an expedition with a gentleman who got in trouble on this expedition from one side of South America to the other. And while I was there, stuck in the town, I really wanted to, catch animals and do stuff that you'd normally, associate with being in the jungle, right? But it wasn't. I was having to make sure this guy was okay while he was in jail, and had to take care of the expedition members and all that stuff too. Well, it got around that I really liked, reptiles and herpetology and stuff. So a couple of the guys told me, "Hey, we got this place. You go over to this serpentarium place." And it really wasn't a serpentarium. It was like just a jungle with cages with just like everything that just hangs out there, and it was really really impressive. So I ended up staying the night there, and woke up in the morning and came over, and the owner came over, and he was this white dude named Goran, and he goes, "Oh, dude, what do you do?" And I'm like, "Well, I design knives." And he was like, "Really? You have to come see all my survival stuff." And from then on, like I met a best friend out in the jungle. He's like, "You need to come back." We really, really hit it off. The guy who on the expedition I was with got out of jail. All that stuff happened. I got back the next year, and he's like, "Well, look, I have all these different friends down here. You have all these people that we could start something." And so that's how Bushcraft Global started. It was just a giant way for me to get back down to the jungle any way I can, to show people what a great place it is.
That's amazing and a cool story, and I can only imagine how scary it must have been when things were going down and you were trying to square it away. But you did mention the jungles of Peru. But what I really wanted to understand is what jungles and countries do you bring, your fans and your visitors when they go on a Bushcraft Global excursion? Where do you actually bring them, and what jungles?
Actually, three different countries: Peru, Colombia, and Brazil, in the tri corners where they all meet together. And you get to walk into one country and then walk into the next, and go across the Amazon to have some fish and chips in Peru. So now we are in Santa Rosa, Peru, across the border, and we're gonna go get lunch. Oh, there's a little puppy. Yeah, well, it wasn't a puppy, it was a little dog, but whatever. So that's starting to spark up, out of the jungle. That's it. So we basically, operate in the Brazilian rainforest and the Colombian rainforest, depending on the property that we're on, and the ties with some of the tribes at the time. Sometimes Brazil's nice to their tribes. Sometimes they don't let them do anything. The really really primitive indigenous ones. And so it's mostly Colombia and Brazil, but there is some talk in the future, far future, of doing some in El Salvador too.
Cool. Oh, interesting. And I think that would actually make a lot of sense seeing some of your ties. So that's cool.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the indigenous people. What tribe of indigenous people do live down there?
There's so many different tribes in the Amazonas regions of Peru, Brazil, and Colombia, and each of these tribes has their own subsets too. Right now, the biggest tribes that I work with are the Yukuna tribe, the Makuna tribe, and Huitoto. And you can hear some of the differences in the nomenclature there and how similar they are. There's a Takuna tribe too, and different ways of saying that. And also the Matisse tribe. The Matisse tribe is the most primitive one that I work with. They were like first discovered in 1979. But they're great to show stuff. But the real awesome tribesmen are the modern dudes because they like to show you what they do and like kind of more survival based of what you can do when you don't have those plants or that area around you. You go, oh, I got fishing line, I could do this in North America too. So that's kind of where that portion of the teaching came from.
Nice. All right. Well, so you said some of those indigenous tribes are some of like the oldest ancient ways. How do
Mhm.
they take to like American visitors? And have you established these like deep-rooted relationships with them now? And what's it like for the cultural differences between the tribes and Americans? And just talk about that a little bit.
Well, when they've associated themselves with me because of my friend Goran, really well because the way we present ourselves as Americans, at least for my group, is they are not just crazy taking pictures, just all the time. The camera's on the side at least three-fourths of the time because they want to learn how to do this stuff, and I think the natives can appreciate that more, and you get this more primal feeling because like my friend gets to show them fish in America, and they immediately aren't like freaked out by the cell phone or anything like that. They just want to see, oh, how are you catching the fish down there? How big is your family? And a lot of a lot of things that you don't really think about. The more modern guys like the stuff that you bring and think it's cool, and they're like, oh, that's the new Apple and stuff, but
Right.
they're not as impressed as like just the indigenous down there being really interested in your methods and your techniques and sharing culture.
That I think that actually makes a lot of sense, and I wouldn't have thought of it that way. And it's great that you're able to establish those relationships and share those cultural, um, experiences. You're really growing together in a certain way, and I think that's pretty cool. It's something that I think a lot of us don't get to experience. So going down there and having that experience really does give you that enrichment that you may not otherwise get. And I think that leads well to one of my next questions, which is if you were to go on your sort of typical Bushcraft Global experience, describe what that looks like. How do you start? Where does everybody begin? How do they interface with you, and how do they eventually get there? And just describe the experience kind of from beginning to end and what someone would expect.
Sure. Well, like from the beginning, I call the person, on the phone for the most part, and really talk with them because I just don't want to bring anybody down there. I never tell anybody no. But like if it's some guy who's just crazy, hell bent on like, killing endangered animals, I'll be like, okay, peace out. So they do that, but I also get to know the people and give them a whole gear list, really, answer all their questions. I help everybody with travel when I can to try and find the cheapest travel down there. And also really coordinate all the travel to make sure everybody lands in all on the same day, more or less. And so I think that's important too. Make sure they don't bring a ton of gear. A lot of people bring tons of gear, including me. And it's just hard to make sure that they don't. And helping them get through customs down in Colombia because we mostly fly into Colombia through Bogota. We used to have to spend a night in Bogota, but now at least pre-COVID. The world now is was having so many more flights out of there that you didn't have to spend the night anymore. Then he landed Leticia on this tiny, tiny little airport. Leticia is in the tri-corners once again of Peru, Brazil, and Colombia. And then we go to the headquarters. And then you acclimate yourself for a day there, and you check out all your gear, and then we go out in the jungle.
Nice. And I think when I think for me and myself personally, I think I could do most of all of that, and I would enjoy it. I think I personally would struggle with food. What do you guys eat? What is the typical cuisine?
Oh man, you gain weight on our trips. Because it's not training, it's an experience, right? Like I don't want to sell people. I mean, I might in the future, but right now I sell vacation jungle survival experiences. So we have rice, we have sausages, we have bread that we make on the sticks. We have tons of rice, tons of um, um, there's lots of modern food that we bring with us. Tons. You never go hungry. There's normally people can get thirds of food, but we also supplement that with fish, supplement it with other animals that we catch and kill, different indigenous flora too, different types of wild edibles, including funguses and insects. So you eat a ton on the trip.
What?
People are welcome to bring food if they want to.
Yep.
Um, if they want to starve themselves, they can go pay somebody else to. But if I'm going to fly clear across the world, I'm going to be eating some really, really authentic cuisine. And if you don't like fish, don't worry. They have a fish like that tastes like chicken. They have a fish that tastes like broccoli. It's like they have a fish for everything down there. Um, and you're catching the fish too, and a whole bunch of different ways. So you don't go hungry down there.
Well, I thought you were going to tell me you pretty much ate piranhas, snakes, and stick bugs, and I was going to have to ask you what was in your fridge. But if I actually had to guess, it's probably leftover chicken nuggets.
Yeah, well, right now, everything in my fridge is just completely full of deer meat.
Oh,
My
wow.
freezer outside is seriously, I'm on my fifth deer right now, so it's just stacked with deer meat. But you do eat tons of piranha, crap tons of piranha on the
Yeah.
trip because you get picked of them trying to steal your lures. They taste like catfish too. They're super super tasty. They're dangerous as hell to just pick up as well. And you have to learn how to deal with that. But you get to eat as much piranha as you want. They're piraku. Oh, what's the other name that people call that thing? Um, there's another name for this giant fish of the Amazon. I'm thinking of the name that they call it right there, and it's so common everybody knows it. But you eat that in Peru at the restaurants and stuff, and it'll come to me later that giant fish with an A at the name or something like that. But oh well.
Nice. Well, okay. So apart from the food, I mean, there's endless skills that you learn. Talk about just a few of the different skills that you may cover, whether they're sort of your modern jungle, or maybe you're picking up some tips and tricks from the indigenous people. What are some of the skills that someone would learn on a trip like that?
Oh, big time knife use and machete use. I mean, I'm a knife designer and I love machetes. I'm writing a book on knife use out in the bush, on machete use out in the bush, and it's really big in using your hands and your modern equipment to make things like blowguns. You make a slingshot, you make a bow, you make baskets, you make little kuksas, little sippy cups we enjoy ourselves out there, and all sorts of different ways of living. But you're also making primitive weapons. We first made a slingshot, and then we started firing clay balls out of the clay that we found at the bottom of the lake, and then we made tiny little bows, and we're launching these bows at the fish, and then we mounted
Got
the
him.
arrows on the slingshots, and we're killing peacock bass with slingshot arrows. So you kind of get to learn how to MacGyver with all the amazing stuff that's out there. But you also go, hey, I can make these arrows at home. I can do this with bamboo at home. So you learn a lot of different skills: cordage, fire making, water purification, shelter. But honestly, the big deal is being able to take all these skills and then put them in your memory bank inside, and then go home and be able to use some of these methods at home. We bring tarps when we're out there. We bring hammocks when we're out there. Most people feel like they have a black belt in hammock use after they've been out there. And it's something that they use for a very long time. And I think that's very important to me too, that you're not just going out there to learn how to survive and live quite well out in the jungle. You're learning how to apply those skills and bring them back.
I love that, and I've come to terms with the idea that a lot of these survival skills, it doesn't necessarily matter where you are or what your environment. It's
Right.
having those principles, but it's how you apply them in those environments. But having the core principles behind the scenes that really enriches you and gives you the knowledge that you need for the safety and the security and the overall experience that you need when you're in those situations. So,
Yeah.
no, that's cool. That's cool.
It's I mean that's why it's called Bushcraft Global. So it's not just like junglebushcraft.com or something. And so I think that's important. That's what's kind of going to make it start to open to some other places too.
Yeah. Oh no, that's great. So one of the tools that you didn't mention is the tattoo needle.
Oh, look at these roughnecks. They're getting tattooed in the jungle. Oh, they're not going to regret that decision later because the Matisse are doing it. Looks lovely. Who got one? We need to see the results. Let me see.
You got 3 dots.
Ooh, 3 dots. That's trace in Spanish.
Oh gosh, yeah. So there's been quite a few people that have been down there who decided to get tattoos by the Matisse tribe. The Matisse tribe are a panther-based tribe, so they have all these crazy, not crazy, they're actually pretty dull lines on their faces and on the tops and sides of their faces. And a lot of the guys who already have tattoos decide to get a jungle tattoo while they're down there. So there's plenty of different trees with ink, and so the Matisse find a special tree down there, and they use a porcupine quill to tattoo some of the guys down there. It's not my thing, If I start doing that, I'd have like tattoos all down my arm. But there's also the biggest thing. The biggest thing is the Huito frame. Huito is this permanent henna dye that after about a day makes your body look completely blue. And so we tell people, oh yeah, put on the insect repellent. This is natural. Oh, you're gonna look great. No problem. You're gonna keep all the bugs out. And they wake up in the morning, and they look like Papa Smurf, and they wanna murder you. And it's so dang annoying, honestly, too, because I'm gonna have all these like tough man pictures and stuff, and like it's always like Goran. I need a picture of you without your hand blue. It's getting like annoying. Why people ask, why is your hand blue? Why is your hand always blue? So that's the other tattoo piece is sweet though, and it goes away after like a week or so. But you end up getting looks in the airport, and from your family members and townspeople around you on your way back. So
It sounds like you guys have a lot of fun, a lot of good skills, and some shenanigans. So very, very cool.
yeah, dude, I got to the point where like when I see them mixing that, I just put Vaseline all over my body
uh-huh.
so I don't some of the photos. Oh, so
I did take note that it seems like you've been down there with some other social media and YouTube personalities like Andy Tran, David from Ultimate Survival Tips, Adam from Equipped to Endure, maybe some others. How were your experiences with those guys?
Andy Tran is an incredible editor. Seeing him, he was the most professional down there that we've had so far because, he was, paid to edit before the times of YouTube and stuff. So he really, really like blew my mind with some of his, like match on movement and, cut scenes and things. Some of the other guys were really fun. They like to ham up how crazy of a trip it was on camera. And that's kind of comical because, like we're sitting there like behind the camera going, like just kind of laughing and trying not to do that while people are like flipping out about eating bugs and stuff. Well, I mean, it's just how do people want to be down there? It's their experience, so they have a really great time. And that we've had Tyler White from T Jack Survival down there too. He was obsessed was showing the Matisse how to do his hand drill or demonstrating his hand drill to them, and Matisse, they think it's interesting. Oh, cool, that's a cool method, but they won't change. You say, okay, great, and stuff because they have very set in their traditional ways and it being the right way.
Yep.
That's really, really neat, and you can see these videos, a lot of different videos from a lot of different people out there. There was, let's see, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, guy on the swamp. He lives in the swamp. Um, Swamper. Oh gosh, this is killing me. It's gonna come back to me just like the Arapina, the fish. But he lives in the swamps of Louisiana, and he has a really cool YouTube following. He came down there and had a great time. There's just been a bunch of YouTubers, but just a lot of people in general. It really helps out anybody who wants to get in the outdoors.
Nice. Well, I guess with that, if there's anything else you'd like to add about Bushcraft Global, please do. And if not, just let everybody know exactly how they can find you and how to get hooked up with a jungle experience.
Sure. And it's Swamp Boat Rob, I think it was. Swamp Boat Rob. You can find it somehow if you look up that, but it's the guy who lives on a swamp boat. Anyway, you can find out about Bushcraft Global by going to bushcraftglobal.com. Just messaging me on Instagram. I'm always there. Especially right now, we're not traveling so much. I'm literally like either here at home with my kids or like waiting in a deer stand answering Instagram questions. So whatevs. And it's personable. A lot of these guys at these companies are not just some person you can't chat with. You just let them know, and they're ready to talk. If they're like me, they might never shut up. So you can also find me on YouTube, Bushcraft Global on YouTube. If you just Google Joe Flowers knife, you'll see a bunch of stuff too with some of the other companies that I work for and other things that I do as well.
Well, you are the one that said Joe Flowers knife. With that, let's change topics. So, and I think that's probably how, if most people are familiar with you, they're probably familiar with you as a designer. And there's no denying that in a lot of ways, you have shaped the face of Condor Tool and Knife and a lot of their direction. And I actually, you are very familiar, obviously, with Walter Matthews. I have to give a great big shout out to Walter. Walter's been amazing, another great designer with Condor Tool and Knife. I think the two of you have done a great job for the brand, but, Joe, you specifically have dozens and dozens of designs with Condor and many, many designs with tops. So what I wanted to know, and we don't need to get in tons of the details, but what I wanted to know is what was your first knife design, the very first one?
Oh man! So before I had the chance to meet Condor, and Tops, I worked with a couple of different small knife makers. One of them was Off the Mat Custom Knives, who just messaged me right before I did this video, to thinking about getting into knife making again. Woohoo! And Fiddleback Forge, way back in the day, and quite a few others like Charlie May, and some other custom knife makers. So just some really good ones, and it's just from hanging out with them sometimes, and knowing just how cool of people they are. Like Andy from Fiddleback Forge, he's done a tremendous amount for the knife community. Teaching different knife makers, and then setting them out into the world, and doing stuff for the guilds that he's a member of. But just knowing a lot of these people in person has helped quite a bit. The first one I think I ever did for real was a pterosaur with Off the Mat Custom Knives. I think that was my first official design, and I think it was before 2009. But anyway, I digress. So the pterosaur would have been the first one.
And I assume that you have one of those in your personal collection?
Oh yeah, I was just using the skinny pterosaur today too because it is beat up. It looks awesome. And it's one of my more used knives. So I'm really excited to see Brian Andrews from Off the Map Custom Knives possibly come out with it again too.
Nice. Well, okay, then what was your first production knife? What manufacturer and what blade was your first production knife?
The very first production knife was with Tops Knives, and that was the Shango. The Shango was a brainchild of the late Mike Fuller and I, and it was a 440C neck knife, very basic, with a notch on the bottom. And this notch, you'd use it to strike a ferro rod on the side, even if you were wearing mittens, and it works pretty well. It was one of my first ideas with actual production. So, of course, I always tell people, yeah, I just, bevel the bottom of it with a Dremel. And I didn't think, oh, some people don't want to do that, and oh, we have to send it this way. But anyway, thing works great now. And then they've made a Shango XL since then, tops it, which is one of my more used stainless knives out there. And that's so my very first official design was for production was the tops.
Well, and I think that's very monumental because obviously the Shango notch has become, I'm going to say, almost iconic with people who are big Bob fans. And, the Tops Bob, the brothers of Bushcraft, you are, I believe, a 1/4 designer in that particular knife.
Yeah, yeah. The biggest thing I would say I did for that knife thing because Mikhail Mirkov of Merkworks is the guy who really did most of the design work. Was I kept pushing and pushing and pushing and trying to try and get the president to try and do a Scandinavian grind knife because I'm crazy about those. And he's like, "All right, Joe, I'll find it. I'll do it, but you really got to sell it." So he told me, "Hey, I want you to meet Caleb and these other guys." And I knew some of them a little bit beforehand, and really hit it off with these guys. And that's how we started the Brothers of Bushcraft Field Knife. And since then, there's been many versions of it. It's their bestseller at Tops. There's even a smaller version of the field knife. It's not related to Brothers of Bushcraft at all, but it's the same thing, but smaller, and a folding knife as well. And we put a Shango notch on the back just because it worked pretty well with a lot of different test people, and that's kind of how the BOP was born. But it was mostly Mikhail really taking the time to check out the handle and do the artwork for it.
Well, I think what you said was pretty profound, and I don't even know if you really realized it in your head, but I'm picking up on it, which is if you're saying that you were the one that really had to push to get a Scandi ground tops knife and you finally got it there, well, think about all the amazing models that have come out since then with a Scandi grind. There's a lot. And in fact, I would say that they are some extremely well made Scandi ground knives.
Yeah, and it wasn't just me, but I wasn't privy to a lot of the other calls, but I was just telling them how much it sells because it works real well. And there was a bunch once he heard it from people like Caleb, and his Dragonfly, and some of the other models out there. He's finally like, okay, we'll try this, and that's kind of how they got started with it. I probably shouldn't say it wasn't mostly me, but man, I talked with Mike hours on end about it. Quite silly, like on my end, but so there. But yeah, they have a lot of really cool skin knives. The MSK is a fantastic blade, and the Dragonfly, of course, and they have a Scandi Skinner that works very well, and quite a few other things too.
Well, and I think one that we can't leave without saying the Brakimo, which it gets a lot of good acclaim. I know a lot of people that swear by it. I personally have not had one, but shame on me because I actually, it's on. I have a lot of knives on my list, and it's been on my list. I just have never yet pulled the trigger, but I know I need to.
Well, it's either that or a Tanaboka Puko. You have the choice of if you come on the trip. You can bring any knife you want, but you get one of those on the trip too.
Oh, wow.
But the Brakimo was kind of like, I got a little bit, tired of the 4-inch blade, 4-inch handle. Believe it or not, bushcraft knife was like, man, I want to make something meaty or something that like somebody could take into combat. And, I think tops might be the perfect people for that type of idea. And so there were quite a few different prototypes as well. Some that were thinner, some with a huge pry bar at the end, which we decided to take off. Some that didn't have a big enough hole at the back, so they just like a big old lump of steel on the back, and quite a few different variations. So it was really fun learning, what tops had the capability of when they made the Brachio. But it was kind of like the answer if you forgot your machete, what to cut something down with. Of course, it's not a replacement for it, but it worked very well to kind of be that in between. Somewhere in between a large, big machete and a small carving knife, and that's where that was.
Sweet. No, that's a sweet spot for me. I definitely, I love that knife size class. So for me, that's right in that sweet spot. That nice weighty survival knife, but definitely capable of doing some good slicing and reasonable. I'm a fire prep guy, so that to me is a nice fire prep knife.
You'd love it, man. It's a beast of a knife. I've been talking with Tops on an upcoming design that will be much smaller and lighter in weight.
Interesting. So, well, you might know this answer. How many production knives would you say you've designed that are still in production today? I mean, if you had to throw a number out there, I mean, I was always curious. I mean, just throw a rough number out there. How many you think you got on the market?
The hard part is because I've asked myself this and then had to go through and like look at Excel files. It really sucks when you have to dig out like different colors. So those don't count. But
Yeah.
even with that, I know I'm well over 110, maybe 115
Wow.
of those, and those are still in production, not total. So there's quite a bit, and most of that is with Condor too. So at least for the past few years, I've been up there with uh, maybe like 80% of Condor's designs, but like Tops is every once in a while because they've got a lot. They have a whole army of great designers there,
Right.
and a lot of people pitching them ideas every day, all the time. I've seen the emails. They're crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay, that's pretty interesting. So, of those, well, which one is your favorite? Like, if you said this is my one favorite design that you came up with, what is your one favorite design? Which one calls to you the most? And I know that's hard because they're all your children.
Yeah, I'm finding the pterosaur on me all the time. Even my Brian Andrews one.
Wow.
I really, really felt that was a really cool design when I first came out with it. When Condor updated and did a polypropylene design, that was really cool. Dan Eastland of Dogwood Custom Knives made me one out of some crazy. I can't remember which powder steel by Crucible it is, but one of the new ones, and it was really neat having it in like a space age mode. So I find myself going back to the pterosaur a lot. And it's just your basic bushcraft knife. And I'm just so used to maybe using something around that line, be it, a Mora or a Skookum bush tool or something that, I've always just been around as, okay, that's an ideal bushcraft knife. I've always found that as like my user.
Yep. Roughly like a 4-inch belt knife style.
Yeah, correct. It's
Yep.
either that or like 50,000 machetes because I'm nuts about machetes and using them like a small knife.
Well, you know what's important, and I actually didn't even intend on asking this question, but I've come to learn the further and further I get that everyone used to always look for this one tool option. I want a one tool option. To me, I'm a two blade guy. I want a two blade setup. I want a big knife to do big knife stuff well, and I want my small knife to do small knife stuff well. And to me, it's two things. One, it's performance. Well, it's three things. One is performance, two is redundancy, but the biggest one is safety. Because when you start playing with the wrong knife in the wrong scenario, you don't want big knives doing little knife stuff, please. And you don't want little knife things going on trying to do big knife things. It's not safe. So to me, I've become a two blade system type of guy. What about you?
I like using big. I think it's harder to use a small knife for a big knife task. But it's definitely, you could still make a big knife work for a small knife task. And I get in arguments with my friend Goran about that all the time, but he's the one trying to sell a tiny little Puko where, Alberto, the guy who's right next to them, is clipping his toenails with a machete. And they're using that for really, really fine work in their different ways. So that's what their technique. They're so used to using a machete for all these tasks, or taking a broken bandsaw blade and making that into a special knife that they can use for leather or something along that line. So I'm a big knife user. I'm a big knife nut.
Yep.
I'm really, that, but that's also, I'm not the safest person in the world too. So I'll grab a machete by the tip and use it, what I'm comfortable with. Not saying I won't get cut, because experts and beginners are the only people who get cut. But I really like using a big knife for a small knife task. But most of my machetes have a sheath where I can put a tiny little knife in there. So I don't have that. Whittle off a piece of your callus on your foot for a piece of fishing bait because you can't find any bait knives out there, and then you catch a fish and then use the machete to chop it up for soup. I think that's pretty cool.
Nice. So, all right. Well, a knife that's not your design, what would you say is your favorite knife of another designer?
Oh wow. Okay, there's a bunch. Of course. I really absolutely love the Rob Garcia Skookum Bush tool. That's absolutely one of my all-time favorite knives out there. And he still makes that around $250, $300. The original Skookum Bush tool. It's been copied bad a bunch of times. Other people from other countries are still calling it a bush tool. It was designed with him and Morris Kahansky. I have some of the original sketches and stuff too. It's a really, really cool knife. I like the Spyderco Endura with the Emerson Wave on it, because you can use it to open up beer bottles, and you can whip it out so fast it looks like it's an automatic. So and it's big enough to where a mugger thinks second when you pull it out real fast. So I really, really, really like that knife a lot. And these are knives that I have on me all the times still. Honestly, Eric, sometimes it's like hard to go out in the bush and not like uh, go, oh man, I gotta wear a Condor, or oh man, I gotta wear a Tops Baracimo. And I have a couple thousand knives here, so like recently I've been focusing on myself just to grab one of my knives out of my bin and just be like, let's go meet him again, and see myself with that. And so I've been forcing myself to try and use other people's knives a lot more, because it helps me appreciate a knife in general.
Yep. All right, and I think I know this answer, but I got one more knife question for you, and it is, I think everybody has gone through the same exact question, and you hear it all the time. If you could only keep one knife and one knife only, which one knife would you keep?
Like it for a survival situation, or if my house is burning down.
If you had to give all the rest of them away and only have and keep one for like forever, like it was like the last one.
Oh, dude, that's a great question.
It's tough.
It would be hard to either do the. I got 5 of them.
See, I
Great.
originally thought you would say the pterosaur, but now that you're saying you're the big knife guy and you'd use the big knife for the little task, how could you walk out with only a little knife?
I'd actually give the. I had to think about this for a second. No matter what, I could find a way to get another one of any knife in the world. So, or at least have that in my head. So the knife that my mentor napped me and put on a sassafras handle and gave to me during a knife use class in front of everybody, that one's super important because he's passed away since then. And it was really enthralling to be awarded that from him for just, helping him learn about knives, and of course him teaching me so much about knife use. And that was Steve Watts. So that knife's very, very important to me. And that would be the one that I'd have to nab, because that way all my other friends who have given me important knives can't get angry either. It's important to think that as well.
Yeah. Well, it's cool that you said that, and actually, my buddy Joe, that he teams up with me on a number of videos, and we did cover the video topic once of what makes a knife great, and one of the things was your emotional connection and the sentimental value that it can bring to you, and some knives it's got that. So I like that
Yeah,
answer, and really
find that.
cool.
You can find that with so many things, now. I got like a Canon D80 that's been with me everywhere, and it's like the top of for me, the top of the class for like a camera. And now it's been so many places, I don't want to take it, all the time anymore because I don't want it to get like hurt or anything like that. And also, it's bulky, it's big, so now sometimes I go back to my Galaxy S10 or my GoPro or something like that, just because I don't want to have that big thing. But I still have that emotional connection to that and these other things too. But sometimes we leave them at home because they would own that job, but you don't want to risk screwing it up.
Nice. Well, it's interesting. You started bringing in a little bit of other gear here. That's another topic that we decided we were going to talk about. So,
Yeah, yeah.
so gear, okay? Gear is absolutely critical. I mean,
Mhm.
knives are important, the tools are important, but the rest of the gear is important as well. And it's funny that you talk about your excursions down in the jungle and people show up with all this stuff, but kicking it into gear, um, I think there's a few things. What is your favorite type of gear? And again, not tools. I'm talking, the gear, the bags and the apparel and the sleeping bags and the fire kits. I mean, what's your favorite type of gear and what's your least favorite type of gear?
I had a lot of chances to review gear for like Backpacker Magazine and Survival Quarterly and all these different places. And so I got to, I still, if I really want to work hard, get to check out certain pieces of gear and stuff. But man, I'm a sucker for hammocks. Shocker. And I really like tarps a lot. I'm crazy about tarps, and I don't know why, but small little like tactical bags, dude. I got a ton of those, man. I've gotten those from so many different places, you know. And I can never find like the perfect haversack. I've always got like one for different things, and so like that's kind of what I wanted to ask you about with gear organization. Like it's hard for me to have a bug out bag because I'm always using these bags for different things and all my equipment for there. So that's kind of like the three big areas where I feel like I have a whole ton of experience, but also just stupid amounts of it. Everywhere tarps, hammocks, and haversack size tactical bags.
Nice. Yeah, for me, I would say, because I'm into the, hiking, camping, and backpacking into the mountains. So for me, my favorite is a good backpacking bag. And that leads me kind of to the next point, and I'll end my thoughts by saying the reason why for me I greatly gravitate towards that backpacking backpack is because I need to trust it. It's important. I mean, to me,
Mhm.
there's some gear that is critically important and it has to be your most trusted gear. So for me, a lot of times it'll be my backpack because it needs to get my gear where I need to get it. It has to be comfortable. It can't leave hot spots. It can't fall apart or fail. So I
Mhm.
naturally gravitate towards the larger backpack, 60, 65 liters sometimes. I can get smaller if I want to go ultra light. I can get down into 50 liters, maybe 45 ish, but that's
Yeah.
pushing it. And I'm more of a comfort hiker, camper, and backpacker, and I'm always bringing stuff to review. So I always have to carry a little bit extra plus my camera gear. So
Yeah, I'm 100% there with you because like maybe the past two times I haven't brought a plethora of review stuff or camera gear, and then last time I was like, you know what, forget it. I just put all my gear in one backpack, and then everything for all the classes and all the promotion I put in a giant clasping Samsonite backpack or
like a
what the
suitcase.
heck was we call it the Tachytron 5000. It was a $5 Samsonite hard case that I got at a garage sale that's traveled all over the world now. And I looked at Gorn last trip and I was like, I'm just going ultralight and bringing all the group crap in that thing, and we're taking that suitcase into the jungle. He's like, let's do it. And so I made trips from the boat into the jungle with the tachytron in there and had an ultralight backpack. But like, because I'm always reviewing gear, I'm like right there with the 50 liter. We recommend on our trips minimum 40 liter because people end up making stuff and taking it with them too. I've brought in all sorts of different things, but the problem with me is the bigger my backpack gets, the more crap I put in it. And now, like I'd say, like in the past like 3 years or 2 years, pretty recently, I'm trying to like challenge myself to be like how I was back in the days when I first got into this in the forums, like try to push myself for an ultralight, backpacking weekend, and do all that instead of bringing, a hand powered bow drill or a hand powered drill to make the crafts and things. So I'm trying that more, but it's hard to do that when you teach too.
Yep.
When you're a teacher, you can make all these ultralight backpacks, recommend them all you want, but you have to bring 50 first aid kits and, stuff for all sorts of different situations out there. So it's hard to balance that out, but I have a bunch of big backpacks too.
Nice.
My most used one, right now, actually, the one that comes on the most trips is Seek Outside. Do you know who Seek Outside is?
I'm actually not that familiar. No.
They are an external frame, aluminum based, like hunting camping.
Yep.
Where you go out and you do spot and stock and shoot something, then you quarter it up and put it in your backpack. And they've specialized in that, plus ultralight teepees and tarps and things. But their external frame, like 50 pound, is like less than 3 pounds, and it's got every single imaginable. You can take that pack off and put a different pack on. You can make it a pack frame. Like it's like the Porsche of adjustments. It's got you have to duct tape all these different adjustments on you once you're done because you're like hanging off like Predator dreadlocks. But you can make it the nicest ride ever. Like I thought I knew how to set up a pack on my back and be comfortable until I discovered them. They made incredible stuff, and it's 100% waterproof to the point where it'll survive a horrible downpour, and it'll float. Those aren't exactly parameters that I say you need on the trips now. I like the Ortlieb style, like Drybags, and Drybags.com, Drybags over the top. They're great just in case we have to get off the boat or do one of the things where we have to float over it in the water. But as long as all your bags are, in the important stuff is in dry, you really learn to embrace the moisture.
Yep. No, that's key, and I have found that I do at this point really do enjoy a roll top design. I'm kind of like the crush and stuff type of guy. I don't put everything in individualized stuff sacks. I used to, but I figured at this point it's actually a lot more efficient for me to crush my sleeping bag into the bottom and then get my clothing down and nice and flat, and then everything just kind of layers and it fills the full volume versus when you get into some of those subdivided stuff sacks and whatnot, you end up with a lot of void space. So to me, having that roll top design where you can get everything in and then kind of crush it down and cinch it down, and then if you get to camp and you ditch your gear and you still need a day pack, that'll roll up nice and tight and you can get your compression straps around it, and it's very efficient.
Yeah, the only thing, and I have like 5, probably even more, dry bag backpacks from different companies. Or 2 different companies didn't survive being down there. The mold gets into them and delaminates it after about a year. Drybags.com, Watershed, they have incredible dry bags. Their survivor. Well, my only problem with just the roll top design in general is you have to unroll to get anything down in there, and if it's not compartmentalized, it takes forever to find.
Right.
And then opening up and then putting it back down, opening up again. So Yeti came out with that little tiny like dry bag thing where it just opens up with magnets and then closes and does that. It is incredible.
Yeah.
They patented it. I hope Yeti made an incredible closure system.
Interesting. I'll have to check that out too.
But seriously, guys, it just kind of opens up and then closes like that, and it's bad waterproof too. Like I doggy paddle with it around my waist like a tacky fanny pack, all underwater, everything, and it's completely waterproof. Good type.
Wild. Interesting.
That's a 20-minute rant. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I would say that if I read you properly, one of your, favorite and most, highly rated gear would be in the tarps and the hammocks. But what do you think that somebody would underrate? What would you find to be underrated gear that people undervalue, but it's actually extremely important?
Cuban fiber.
Cuban fiber. Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody's like, oh, it's not worth it. Dude, buy once, cry once. I've had one that's lasted 10 years now. Like I got it for a discount because I was going to tell, show all, and I did during the expedition. I took many pictures of the Z-Pack, Hexamid, I believe, hammock, and I still have it to this day. When I open up my new website, I'm going to have just a whole like ode to the equipment that's come back each time and each time. And now I'm like,
Right.
man, $500 for a tarp. I know to some people that sounds crazy, but I think I might buy once and cry once again because that's an incredible piece of equipment. And also now that I know how much that type of crazy space age stuff can take, I'm willing to buy a giant one to have like a Bushcraft Global breakdance party underneath my tent, out there. And it's going to weigh the same as everybody's small little war bonnet, tent, but I'm going to have like, you know, a giant like helicopter landing worth of it. So Cuban fiber, definitely a cool material to check out.
Interesting. Yeah, that's again great advice, and I'm glad because that's why we wanted to talk a little bit of gear.
There's another one out there too, and I'll try and keep this rant short. But the PVA cloths, polyvinyl alkylate, they use them. They finally are now picked up in camping, so they can find them in Walmart Center and camping. But it was actually used to wipe off cars. These are incredible rags. I use them at home all the time now. Stuart Goring, who does stuff down in Guyana, swore by me. He goes, Joe, you're going to have a great time in the jungle. You're going to want them in the wintertime. You're going to want them everywhere. I mean, I don't have to put away wet tarps anymore. It sucks up 3 times as much water. If I get like my socks wet or something, I wring them up in there and it sucks out a ton of the water. They're just very handy to have. So right now, I think they're called the Absorber in the U.S.
Yep.
Definitely worth their weight in gold.
Yep. Nice. Well, I think you've already said that you have maybe too many knives, couple thousand of them.
Yes.
But, it sounds like just in general, you kind of have too much gear. I know I certainly do. And with too much gear, and as you mentioned, we do struggle a little bit with different storage solutions. And I know that storage for me is something that it's been an iterative process. It's never been a done once, solve it type of solution. I go through my gear very regularly, and I'm always tweaking my storage solutions. And for me, storage really revolves around, I think, a few main parameters. One is my space, a place where I can put stuff that the rest of my family's not going to damage it, and it's not in their way. Okay, so that's the first thing. And second is, well, if that's the case, this room here is really the only room that I have that is truly all mine. And it's also where I do my filming. So I've taken the approach to store my gear in a way that it becomes, in essence, a backdrop for my videos. So that's part of it. In the gear genre, needs to look the part, needs to feel the part. And so for me, having the gear is just part of that. But the other part really is when I go out and when I go on an excursion or an adventure, I want to make sure that I have a clear thought process with my gear in an organized fashion so that I don't make a mistake. And I start my packing for a trip a minimum of 2 weeks in advance so that I have an opportunity to go through my gear to make sure that based on the trip I'm going on, I've thought about it carefully and I've selected the right gear for the trip because every trip requires a different kit. And I have enough stuff and enough redundancy that I can exactly fine tune my kit depending on what I'm going to do. So I start with my bag and then I go through I usually start with my shelter, which is going to dovetail into my sleep system. So I start with my big three every single time. So for me, I'll start with going through my bags. I'll figure out what bag I'm going to grab, and then you can see up above I have pretty much all of my tarps and all of my tents all laid out. So the entire top row there is tarps and tents. And I'll select that one that I need. I'll figure out how it's going to fit in the bag, and then I move into my sleeping bag and sleep system. And that's another thing that's important for me with my sleeping bags is keeping them lofted. I do use a lot of down. I do have some synthetic, and I make sure that whatever I do, I keep them, fully lofted. I don't want to compress them. So along this side here, I pretty much have all my sleeping bags on hangers. And so with that, what I found is the best system for me is really built around these sort of adjustable Rubbermaid wire shelf systems. And I hang all my backpacks on hangers, and I lay out the poles, and then everything else kind of goes in bins. And so if you look over this way, you can see all along here, I have all my bins. And each one of the bins contains a different major component, whether it's cordage, tie-outs, fire making, lanterns, headlamps. So as I go through my progression, I'm building my kit, and I'm making my stop at each one of my little stations through here to make sure that I don't miss anything. Same with my cooking kit.
Where you have your fire making stuff and all that, is that at an angle to where that holds the Rubbermaid with the lip?
Well, these are on an angle. So if you look at it from the side here, these ones here are all slanted. So as I come up to everything, it's sort of presented towards me. The one on top is flat. So the one on top, I have all my cooking gear and some of my fuels and canteens and whatnot. Then I get into all my headlamps and lanterns. Mm-hmm. This is like medical supplies. Then I get into all my cordage. And then for me, one of the biggest advances was storing my knives, because again, having knife problems. So these are all my fixed blades, and I made myself a custom block. So I have them all laid out here. And then beneath it, I have all my toolboxes with the folding knives. And then ultimately what I do is I have another toolbox in my, I have a little workshop, and I put all of my sheaths in 3 drawers. So 1 drawer with leather, 1 drawer with Kydex, and 1 drawer with ballistic nylon. And when I grab a knife, I just go grab my sheath it up, and I'm good to go.
Wow.
So that's what I've done.
Yeah, I'm down into everything until you went to knife storage, and I was like, I don't have nothing for that. I had to have custom shapes or rolling things out, and I'm not going to show my organization style because it's much like that, but completely chaotic right now. But I do really love the slant system, big time. I really like how that's presenting to you, where you can see that. I'll talk with you about that later, but I want to figure out how to visualize how the stuff doesn't all bunch up at the bottom, because that's going to be perfect for my cordage, which I have a cordage section and a dry bag section and all that stuff too. Do you store your hammocks? Do you store your tents sealed up? Do you have any problems with nylon degradation or mildew in there?
I haven't yet, and one of the things that I did, and over to the side, I have an unfinished section of my basement, which is a workshop. I've strategically laid out hangers along all the rafters, and every time I get back from a trip, I hang them. I leave them there for a couple days, maybe sometimes up to a week before I pack them back up. So everything will fully dry. It's a nice dry basement. I have no problems. There's no real bugs. I mean, maybe there's the occasional spiders, but no bugs, no rodents. It's dry. So for me, it's a trusted space where I can hang everything out, let it dry, and then I pack it up. So I have not had any problems with degradation, at least to this point.
Yeah, and like some of the stuff, it just rots. Some nylon from like 10 years ago or even 20 years ago, some of it, like the MSR stuff, just started to peel off on some of mine. So I haven't been storing my tents in their bags rolled up. They've been in just laundry bags, but I might go back to that. Kristen Hostetter, former editor of Backpacker Magazine, wrote a book on fixing gear, and I actually have some pictures in it and some stuff. about knife use. But in it, she talks about storing tents, and I can't remember what she said about that. And so I'm going to go back and find it out because that saved me a ton of space. Um, and I think that's really important as far as teaching goes. I have a whole section just devoted to fire steels and also testing, and it all kind of comes together with that too. I need to test what sort of nylon material can we put around a knife to a save money or b just save width, like on a neck knife or something like that. And it's important, and that's why I really wanted to talk about that because it's very inspiring to see that amount of gear organized in that fashion. Backpacks are a pain in the butt to have hanging all the time. You gotta have a lot of space for that.
It is. It takes up a ton of room, but for me, it makes sense for me because I've dedicated this area to do it. Again, I like that mental process of going through them. Same with, an everyday carry. I do change out from time to time. I do desperately need to thin the herd because, I constantly have stuff coming in, working with companies and vendors and, doing additional product reviews. You do run out of space. I mean, I have filled this room to 100% of capacity and thinned it out. And it can only get so dense. And it's amazing to think that I'm at the point where I can legitimately fill an entire room chock full of gear, but I'm there.
Yeah, I am 100%, not surprised. It gets that way for a lot of us. It got I could when I wrote for some of the magazines and stuff. If I wanted the piece of gear, I just write about it. And then the company was like, "Oh, dude, you did a great job. Would you like to try out some of this? You don't have to write about it if you want to, or we'll send you this knife and this knife too. Just tell us what you think." And all of a sudden, like a couple hundred knives later, you're just like, "Oh gosh," and then topple that, with some of the other stuff that you do out there. I had to start getting rid of boats and canoes and stuff too because everything takes space.
Yeah.
And I might go through the great eBay sell again, not for the because I've been buying stuff now. That's the other cool part about not having to write an article is that when you buy stuff, you legitly when you're done with it, you can be like, all right, eBay, there you go. I don't feel like I'm doing anything bad since I got that. So I like that aspect too. So now I am turning around gear a lot. If it's not perfect, it's like peace out.
Yep. Well, nice. I think with all gear, and you've talked a little bit about some MSR stuff that's maybe delaminated or,
Yeah, they have a really good warranty though. And all I had to do was send that back and I got a new one.
Wow. Nice. But what about what happens when you're out on the trails? Let's throw out a couple interesting gear failure stories, and I think I'm gonna start with my first one. So went on a nice backpacking trip. We decided to go in March. Didn't realize, well, we kind of knew what we were getting into, but that it was going to be legitimately like one of the coldest and nastiest days we could possibly get into. Turns out the mountain we were beneath, it was -70. Where we were camping, it was -15 Fahrenheit. Pretty significant. I was in a hammock, as I probably shouldn't have been, but decided that was the way to go. So middle of the night, and if you learn some of the tips and tricks from people who spend a lot of time sleeping outside, if you got to go to the bathroom, you just get up and do it. Don't hold it because you're not doing yourself any favors. So just get up and do it. So I was kind of dreading it. I knew it was extremely cold and everything was going to freeze. So I get up, I go out, I go to the bathroom, I get it done. I come back, I go to zip up my sleeping bag, a beautiful Cedar Summit sleeping bag, and the zipper filleted in half and split. And it was so dangerous because it was like 4 in the morning. I spent the whole rest of the night sleeping, holding my sleeping bag together to the point where 3 of my fingers froze, and I ended up numb for about 4 months in 3 of my fingers. And the feeling did finally come back. But talk about potential sketchy situation.
Good gosh. Oh man, yeah. That's another segue for Christina's book, How to Fix Gear. It has everything from like zipper fixes with like paper clips, all sorts of stuff. It's really, really handy. And that's where I learned about. We had tent repair kits with us, and one of them had like not just a little bit of what's that stuff called?
Tenacious tape?
Not the tape, the U500 stuff, snow seal, not snow seal, snow drip. What is it? The seal,
Yeah. Oh, yeah, like a seam sealer.
seam sealer. That's it.
Yeah.
And one of our buddies, uh, his very, very old Solomon boot blew out in the middle of the trip. You know, like 20 miles in, and it was his only boot. And so that night, of course, we took all the snow sealer we had and snow sealed it like crazy, and then duct taped it too, and duct taped and duct taped and duct taped it. And sure enough, the duct tape came off during the trip after stepping, so much the way we had it rigged. But the snow sealer held it on for the rest of the trip, and he was able to complete the trip with it. I learned that trick from that book. But that snow seal stuff works great as a last stitch glue, fire starter, etc. You put it in there, it works awesome.
Interesting. Well, so it's funny because I am very, very particular about my boots because to me, I cannot imagine having a boot failure. And I did actually have a trip with a friend again, hiking in the mountains and trying to get up to a peak. It was about an 8-mile trip, get right to the top, and 2/3 of his sole, the lower sole, had ripped right off. Now, we were on top of the mountain. We had already ditched most of our gear down at our base camp. Now, luckily for us, one of the guys happened to bring zip ties and zip tied his entire sole back onto his boot to the point where not only did he get back down the mountain to camp, we made it all the way back to the car, and the zip ties held up.
That's incredible. That delamination of the sole is caused by either dry climates, like leaving it in your car too much, or leaving it by like a heater or a wood stove. So even like a brand new boot, or not brand new, but like a pretty, like well-used boot, might have some delamination problems, and it's not just the manufacturer's fault. It's really, well, the epoxy's fault that they're using. That's why I like now, one of my characteristics kinda for finding a boot is having a stitched bottom, along the outside, just because I'm particular about that. And you can just wear through stuff pretty darn easily if you're not careful. And that's what happens. I mean, let's see, we've had a guy who bought a cheap hammock, and that ripped in the middle of the night. So now on my trips, I always have a backup hammock for whoever's hammock fails. This happened actually on 3 occasions, not just with the cheap hammock, but with one well-known hammock company too. I mean, that could have been anything, just an abrasion it could have been the dude's knife in his pocket. It could have been anything along that line. And we've seen, that type of failure where that's a piece of your sleeping gear. So of course, having some redundancy, like you said, is great. You use like what I call my ultralight lunch hammock, that I just like have, in the camp, just while we're twining and doing stuff, and putting that underneath it like an overquilt to kind of like have a scoopy, woomy looking thing underneath the person, so we didn't have to like rely on a stitched hammock to get them through the night. And that's a great example where sleeping gear or something like that can fail. Just sat there and wove one. So
yeah. Do you teach that as well?
Yeah, actually, the weaving's really easy. You can do it with different types of barks in the U.S. If you go during the springtime when the sap is running, it's just a lot harder to process the intercambium fiber of the bark off to do it. But it's essentially like, it's so simple I can do it, so anybody can do it. It's like taking these strips and making them long ways, and then just putting like a few fibers in between just to keep them together, and then keeping kind of balanced on it.
Interesting. Well, nice. Well, Joe, at this point, if you have anything left you'd like to cover, I think.
I'm surprised it's 2 hours long. Normally, I never shut up.
I appreciate it, man. That was fun, and I'd like to think, this is a start. first conversation. I think, if you'd be interested in doing this again, I'd certainly love to have you back on the channel. And I greatly appreciate your time. And I hope everybody enjoyed that. Some tips and tricks and some interesting factoids. And, looking forward to the world settling down so we can get back to some adventures, including maybe some Bushcraft Global.
Oh yeah, dude, I set you up. You basically have a camera guy the whole time down there. Between me and my friends and stuff. It's a trip that Dogwood Custom Knives has been on now 6 times, and I think I've only had it 8 times now, and he's coming on the next trip. So if you don't like it, you're welcome to have your money back. It's life changing, but I'd also really love to go into some more gear organization. That's some of the best setups I've seen in a while. So I think everybody can learn because everybody's got way too much of something, whether it's Legos and Gucci bags or just giant inflatable backpacks that they can't store anywhere. So it's really cool.
Yeah, I will definitely. I'd like to go through that with you at another time. I appreciate it. But I'd like to say thank you again very much. For everybody watching, definitely take a look at Joe Flowers and all of his, social media, his website. Again, just remind everybody where they can find you.
Yep. Bushcraftglobal.com. Hey, if you're a web designer, hit me up. Also, Instagram, Condor Tool and Knife. I do a lot of stuff for them. They've been wonderful people to discover the knife industry with and work with. And they're just fantastic to me. And Tops Knives. And you can find more with things coming up. Campcraft Outdoors and I are doing a survival trip down in the Florida Keys this summer. So check that out too.
Nice. Well, again, Joe Flowers, thank you very much. We'll talk to you soon.
You too.